Welcome everyone to this very special evening where you have the great honor to hear from Rabbi Rubinstein momentarily. It's being presented by Chazaq, Beit Eliyahu. We'd like to thank Beit Eliyahu for partnering together with this very special evening. I'd like to thank Zoya, Rabbi Tabiba from the shul for always working together, for opening the shul, for all the great work they do for the community. Tonight's shir is being dedicated to Zecher Nishmat Chaim Ben Ogul, Neshama Shav Nolia, and also for Atzlacha for the family. This is the first of hopefully many monthly Shidduchim events and programs, and anyone who wants to get involved, hear about more events, obviously sign up, or you can see any of the Shulchanim or anyone on the front table. And if you email us at shidduch@chazaq.org for more information. And this is one of many programs and initiatives that Chazaq does for the community. Organizes amazing shiurim and events like tonight, different communities. Chazaq's main mission to help Jewish public school students transfer to yeshiva. As we know, there's thousands and tens of thousands of Jewish public school students, unfortunately, in public school. And everyone sitting right now or watching online, if you know anyone who has children in public school, you can transfer to yeshiva, reach out to Chazaq. And it could definitely be a great merit for you and your family. And everyone, why did you get a raffle ticket? Because right after the rabbi speaks, we're going to announce all the raffle winners, and you'll get your raffle prize, whoever wins, in the table in the front over there. And we'd like to thank all the Shulchanim for volunteering their time for being tonight's event. And right after the lecture, there will be all the Shulchanim will be downstairs if anyone wants to meet the Shulchanim, and there'll be food right downstairs. I'd like to thank Rivka Meirov, Lydia Mosheyev, Rahman Soleimani, Natan Abov, Mrs. Bedi Abov for their help in putting together tonight's event. The rabbi put out an amazing book, The Great Jewish Women Then and Now. It's available for purchase on the table right over there, right after the lecture. And it is our great, great honor to call upon Rabbi Rubinstein.
Thank you, Rabbi, as usual. And I'd like to express my own thanks to the synagogue, and of course to Chazaq and Torah Anytime, who I think are recording this for us, and for you for coming along. I should tell you, it was very nice of Rabbi to point to my new book, Truly Great Jewish Woman Then and Now. As we're talking about marriage, I just want you to know that you should have this book, particularly if you're a man. Why? It's called Truly Great Jewish Woman Then and Now. It goes through some of the great Jewish women of Tanakh, tells their story with new chidushim, new insights, and then tells the story of a contemporary Jewish woman whom I knew, who walked in her footsteps. It's very inspiring. Now you guys, I assume, are not yet married. That's why you need this book. You buy it, and you keep it hidden in a drawer till you get married. And the first time you upset your wife and she isn't speaking to you, then you take it out and say, "Oh honey, I was walking past this bookstore and I saw the name Truly Great Jewish Woman Then and Now. I immediately thought of you and I bought it." That's why you should have it. I just thought I'd say thank you very much. Yeah, and again it's the Zecher Nishmat Chaim Ben Ogul. His neshama should have an aliyah. I heard somebody outside, just as I was coming in, saying to his friend that he's looking forward to hearing Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson. This is something which happens all the time. In fact, there's a couple I'm very friendly with in Toronto, and they seem to be fans of mine, so they said to another couple they're very friendly with, "You've got to go and hear this guy. He's really good." And so they persuaded them, all six bought tickets to fly from Toronto to New York. They got into the taxi, they got onto the ship, which was, because they'd seen the advertisement, I was doing a lecture and a week's cruise from New York to the Bahamas and the Caribbean. And when they got onto the boat, that's the first time they read the poster properly. And it said, Y.Y. Jacobson. So it happens all the time. So for those who've come to your Y.Y. Jacobson, I'm sorry, I'm the tall, handsome one, he's not. And secondly, I have to tell you, I'm so excited to be speaking to young people because last week, after Shabbat, I won't mention which shul. But there's another synagogue, and the people there it was the seniors in the synagogue, very old people. And it was because they were scared of COVID, this new COVID thing that's apparently not such a big deal, Baruch Hashem. Because this new COVID thing, they decided, because they were nervous and they're very old, it would be a good idea instead to have it over Zoom. Zoom is a terrible way to teach. I don't know if you've ever been to Zoom sharing. There I was, and all those little pictures of all those people. And the lady, who's an older lady, said to everybody, could you please mute your microphones, because she didn't know how to do that, because the person in charge can mute everybody's microphone. And of course you see the pictures of all the people who are joining. You know about this stuff. But of course people who are there by telephone, there's no picture. Halfway through the share, and when somebody speaks, the little box lights up, the little box from the telephone lights up at the bottom, somebody says, "This guy's so boring. I can only understand half of what he's saying." Whoa! Anyway, so because old people have no embarrassment about expressing the fact they're not happy, right? So, but I think it might be due to the fact you can only hear every second word, and probably he's not used to my accent, and I'm only telling you that story so I can quickly check, are you understanding me?
Yes.
Yes. Then we can get down to business and talk about tonight's share, which of course is dating and marriage. So, let me tell you a story. Incidentally, I've got a bit of a cold, so if I'm a bit of a throaty, I do apologise. But many years ago, when I was still living in England, I used to broadcast a lot in an organisation called the BBC, which I'm no longer going to be broadcasting on, so don't worry. But anyway, so I've been broadcasting. In fact, they booked me. I've just signed a contract for another 6 to write another 6 programmes for them, for a BBC Radio, which I'm going to be cancelling. That'll be fun. Anyway, so basically, the BBC has just been declared the 3rd most anti-Semitic organisation in the world. So I've decided maybe I won't go with them anymore. However, when I lived in England, I used to write TV shows for the BBC. I used to appear in TV show, national radio and TV all the time. And one day I got a phone call from a guy, and he phoned up to say hi. He sounded like very hi. People in the media say hi a lot. Hi. So he said, hi, is this Rabbi Rubinstein? And I said, yes, it's Rabbi Rubinstein. Hi. I said, hi. Stop saying hi. Anyway, so basically, he said that he was making a program for one of the television stations in the UK, and it was called The Weekend. And they wanted to have 3 documentaries going out national TV 3 weeks in a row, talking about what people did with their weekends. So the first show they'd already filmed, and it was following a group of Manchester United soccer fans to see what they did with their weekend. Probably not a lot of surprises there. Lots of booze, fighting and screaming, and that's that. The next one was to go and follow a group of super rich people who have yachts, their own private yachts. And they go on regattas, and after they go sailing about, then they go to the boathouse and have cocktails, right? Fine. And then he said, and the 3rd show we want to make about the Sabbath. The Sabbath. And he said, so we'd like to make this film about the Sabbath, and would I be an advisor on the show? I said, sure. He said, I know a little bit about the Sabbath, he said, because my father used to be a priest. I said, okay, fair enough. And then I put down the phone, we arranged he would come to see me, put down the phone, and when I put down the phone, I thought, couldn't be. Couldn't possibly be. Now his name was James Runcie, or his name is James Runcie. And when he said his father was a priest, I thought, no, it can't be. But when he came to see me, it turned out my suspicion was correct. His father, the priest, was the Archbishop of Canterbury, the head of the Church of England, with about 100 million Hasidim all over the world. Anyway, he's a lovely, lovely guy, but 6'4", big tall guy. And we sat down and he discussed what we could do for the Jewish Sabbath. What ideas I could advise him with. So I said, you know what we're going to do is, we're going to go to the wonderful kosher bakery in those days, called Swiss Cottage. We're going to be there before they open the doors at 6 o'clock in the morning. We're going to see them putting all the challah like a lot on the shelves, and all the cakes, and all the cookies. And then we'll point the cameras at the door at 6 o'clock when they open, and all the housewives will come in, like a stampede, and then all the challahs will go flying off the shelves, and then we'll follow those challahs back to the Shabbat tables, and we'll film the Shabbat table being made, and we'll interview people. He said, "You've done this before?" "Yeah, fine." Then he said to me, "Could I interview you for the program?" I said, "Sure." So we arranged that he would come on Friday afternoon with a film crew to interview me for the program. Now, living in Manchester in England, Shabbat goes out at about 10:40 in the summertime. It starts very late, goes out very late. So we had plenty of time. He said it would take about half an hour. And so along came the film, the cameraman, the sound person, a very pretty young lady who took notes of how pretty it was, and him. And so we put in the cassette, and he started to interview me. And he asked me all about Shabbat and Jewish families and what it's all about. And I said, there's a famous English poet who said, more than the Jews have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jews. And I told them that Shabbat is not a whole load of things you can't do. It's a whole load of things you no longer have to do. Can you be at home when your phone beeps that there's a text message or an SMS message or a Facebook message, or you get an email and not answer it? On Shabbat, you don't have to answer it. I told them that on Shabbat, we actually sit at the table and ask our children if they've got a Devar Torah. What did they learn in school today? Whoa, parents actually interested in their children. That's unusual. And they sing together. We sing together. There was a time when non-Jewish families used to sing together as well. But we actually sing together. And he was very interested. And after half an hour he said, "Do you mind if I ask you more questions?" I said, "No." So they put another cassette into the film camera and he started filming. And then he was asking me questions that were clearly for him, not for the program. I told him that modern man has a God-shaped hole in him. It wasn't my idea, famous philosopher said this. 20th century man or 21st century man has a God-shaped hole in him. There was a time when people were religious, but that whole religiosity has been sucked out of us. People don't know what religion is anymore. And we carried on talking, and at the end of the hour and a half, he said, "Can I ask you another question?" I said, "Sure." He said the following thing, "Rabbi Rubinstein, I'm not Jewish. None of the film crew here are Jewish. Is there anything we can have like Shabbat? Is there anything we can have like Shabbat?" After he heard what Jewish families are like, and I heard about what we do in Shabbat, is there anything we can have that's like Shabbat? And actually I was quite embarrassed by his question. I said, "James, look, you don't have to be Jewish. You just have to be the best person you are. You don't have to be like me, like us." Then he said, "One last question. This is astonishing. Listen to this now. Remember, his name is James Runcie. He's a son of the Archbishop of Canterbury. That's one of the highest officers, appointees of the Christian Church." He said, "This is my question. Is there any hope for us? Is there any hope for us?" After he heard what Jewish families are, mums and dads, and singing and being together once a week. There was a festival a couple of weeks ago, the 25th of December, right? It's a big deal in the non-Jewish world, that 25th of December. As we say in Yiddish. We do an Xmas meal every week. That's Shabbos every week. Not just one meal, 3 meals. And getting together family, we do it all the time. Is there any hope for us? I thought that was quite a good issue. I thought it was quite a good thing. Because when you know what a Jewish family is, then when they hear and contrast and compare it to their own lives, can we have a bit of that? It's a wonderful thing, a Jewish family. How do you get one? Oh, and I remember I was speaking in a shul in London, And this was just before COVID, so about 3 years ago. And they brought me, I was speaking to 1 million, there's 3 minyanim in the show. I spoke to 1 million, they brought me into the main show, and I sat at the front, and there was an old fellow on the bima. He was 83 years of age, and he was celebrating his 70th bar mitzvah. His 70th bar mitzvah. His parsha, 70 years, 83 years of age, he was called up for his parsha. And there he was, and even though he was 83, he had a beautiful voice, and he read the parsha perfectly, and the haftarah perfectly, and then he made his brachot, and it was a very nice, most people there, sort of tears in their eyes, beautiful. Then he got down from the bima to go back, and the ladies section, a bit like this one, was a curtain. And suddenly the curtain pulls aside, and there's this old lady looking out, and her face was lit up with pride. This was his wife. Had probably seen him doing this over 70 years. One of the most beautiful things I think you can ever see, and you must have seen this, an old couple like that, who are clearly as in love with each other after 70 years as they were when they were first married. Have you seen that? It's a beautiful thing. And they don't even have to speak. They know what the other one is saying. They understand it almost like telepathically. It's a fabulous thing. There's a wonderful sefer called Tzaddik in Our Time. There was somebody called Rabbi Aryeh Levine. This is a famous story. He was known as the Tzaddik of Yerushalayim. And once he went with his wife to the doctor, and the doctor was very pleased to see this famous rabbi, Rabbi Aryeh Levine, and he said, Rabbi Aryeh, how can I help you? He said, it's not me, it's my wife. My wife's foot hurts us. My wife's foot hurts us. It's possible for two people to become one person so closely that it's my wife's foot hurts us. That's something to achieve. That's a beautiful thing to grab hold of. Yeah. So how do you get there? How do you get to that? That would be good to know, wouldn't it? How can you get to that? Well, the answer is, I suppose we should really start at the very beginning. That's a very good place to start. You know, of course, it says in the Talmud, 40 days before the conception of you and me, a heavenly voice called out and said, Bat Peloni, this girl's soul, Le Peloni, for that boy. And we know Adam Arishon was one person, physically one person. Then Hashem takes the female side out to be a separate individual. For another share, we can explain why. And then there are the same person, but in two halves. The same with the soul. So that's why I'm only half a neshama, and you're only half a neshama. When we get back together again, we're complete. And the way that men see things is different to the way that women see things. We'll be talking more about that in a second. And vice versa. Men and women see things differently. But the reasons why people have two eyeballs is with two eyeballs, you have perspective. You see things better. And with a wife and a husband, then the man will supply the male perspective, the woman supplies the female perspective, and then you get the real perspective, the complete perspective. And that's a good thing to get as well. So basically, you're half a person until you get married. And if you go about it in the right way, Hashem makes sure that the other half of your soul, which is out there, which was preordained for you to meet if you go about it in the right way, and Hashem will make sure that it happens. I remember I had once in a share in England a true story about someone called Rav Scheinberg. Have you heard of Rabbi Scheinberg? He was a great, great Rosh Hashiva, originally from New York, originally from Brooklyn. And Rav Scheinberg was a great New York Yankees fan, as he was a boy, and he loved baseball. But he became a huge, huge Rosh Hashiva in Yerushalayim, and one day he was being taken on a tour of the north of Israel. Have you ever been to the north of Israel?
You mean like Haifa?
No, I mean the mountains and the Galil. It's beautiful. It's stunningly beautiful. And he was being taken there by a fellow who's a tour guide called Gershon Kaufman. Gershon Kaufman is a Yerushalmi Jew, with long twiddly pants. And he's self-taught. He taught himself English, and he taught himself all the history of Israel. In Israel, you have to be qualified to be a tour guide. And he took Rav Scheinberg on a tour of the north. And he knows the history of every stone of Israel inside out. And they came to the waterfall at a place called Banyas. Anybody here ever been to the waterfall at Banyas? This is not Niagara Falls, it's not massive. It's nice, it's about a little bit higher than the show here, the ceiling of the show. And it's a small pool, not much bigger really than the area here. Anyway, he was standing there and this fellow was explaining to him all the history and what was going on there when David Amela came there and all sorts of stuff. And when they were there was another group visiting Banyas, a group of kids, teenage kids, from a non-religious kibbutz. So they were there, they were at the top of the waterfall, and they were like, 16, 17-year-olds. There's a madrich. The madrich's a young man who's, 19, 18, just a couple of years older than them. And one of the girls leant over too far, and she fell. So she fell that distance there into the water. Whether it was the fact the water is incredibly cold, and that's a surprise, the water is incredibly cold in the waterfalls and the rivers of the Galil in the north of Israel, or whether it was the impact of her falling in the water, she started to go under, she started to drown. Gershon Kaufman, this Hasidic Jew with a bit of a... Do you know that Yiddish word, boich? Boich. It's actually the Scottish Gaelic word for beautiful, which is very interesting. A boich, right? So he took this long coat, he throws off his long coat, throws away his flying saucer hat, big round hat, throws it away, dives in, swims out, grabs the girl, pulls her to the surface, around her chest, swimming back to the side, gets to the side, pumping the water out of her chest, out of her lungs, mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Meanwhile, the guy, the madrich, the guy in charge, the 19-year-old, and the rest of the kibbutz came tumbling down the waterfall, from the waterfall. By the time they get there, the girl is sitting up, coughing and spluttering, but breathing. And when he gets there, he says, "Oh, toda, toda." And he said to Gershon Kaufman, in Ivrit, he said, "Slach li, chashafti shecharedim kamachem, asur lachem lenageh be'isha." Excuse me, I thought that you frum Jews, you're not allowed to touch a woman. So Gershon Kaufman started to poke him in the chest. He said, "Hey, you're the madrich. You're the guy that's meant to be in charge. How come you didn't dive in after her?" He said, "You know why? I'll tell you why. You didn't want to get your cigarettes wet." Wow. They're a little bit tougher in Israel, right? Anyway, so Gershon Kaufman walked away, and with Reb Scheinberg, he's walking back to the car. He's, of course, soaking wet, puts his jacket on, his coat on, he puts his hat on. And Reb Scheinberg said to him in Yiddish, "Sie wird sein eine von uns." Sie wird sein eine von uns. She'll be one of ours, whatever that meant. Sure. Anyway, so the next day, that was Thursday, next day is Friday, Erev Shabbos. It's about 10 minutes before Shabbat. I don't know what it's like in your house 10 minutes before Shabbat, but it's usually very hectic. And is this done, is that done, is the Shabbos kettle on, is all the things done? And 10 minutes before, suddenly there's a knock on the door. And so he opens the door, and there is the young woman standing there. The young woman from the day before, the young woman whose life he had saved. How she found out who he was, and where he lived, he didn't know. She said, "I'd like to spend Shabbat here with you." So he took her in and he introduced her to his wife. Explained, this is the young lady I told you about yesterday. They found somewhere for her to sleep. Israeli flats, you will know, are usually too small for the number of kids that are there. After Shabbat, they made Havdalah. After Havdalah, the girl started to cry and said, "I don't want to go home. This is what I've wanted all my life. This is what I've wanted all my life." And so Gershon Kaufman didn't know what to do. So he phoned his rabbi, and the rabbi said, "How old is this girl?" 17. "And she's got parents waiting at home. She must go home. But if after 3 weeks she wants to come back, you must allow her to come back." So after 3 weeks, this is straight after the maid Havdalah, straight after Shabbat went out, the phone rings and it's the girl. 3 weeks are up, can I come back? So she came back. Then she stayed with them for 2 weeks, and they decided the best thing to do would be to send her to a seminary called Neve Yerushalayim. Don't know if you've heard of Neve Yerushalayim. It's a great seminary for girls who don't have such a strong learning background. They can catch up. And so she went to Neve Yerushalayim. When she went to Neve Yerushalayim, she stayed there for 2 years. Learned, caught up perfectly. Also got a teaching qualification. And got herself teaching in a school in Petach Tikva, which is just outside Tel Aviv. And she went there, and you know what it's like, I'm sure you know this, if you've ever moved cities and moved from one place to the other, you'll know what it's like when you try to keep in touch with your old friends, but when you move into a new place, it's hard. And so she started to lose contact with Gershon Kaufman and his wife, and they lost contact with her. And then, but 2 years after that, Gershon Kaufman and his wife received an invitation in the mail. And he opened it, and it was an invitation to the girls' Chatana. She was getting married. She, a Balat Tshuva, was marrying a Baal Tshuva. And the envelope was addressed to Lemi Shematzil Nafshi Bugufi. To the person who saved my life, my body, my life, my physical life, and my soul. And of course, Gershon Kaufman and his wife went to the girls' wedding. It was a beautiful wedding like you get in Israel, outside a starry canopy of stars twinkling in the sky. Gershon Kaufman and all the people had gathered around the chuppah, and when he looked under the chuppah, he was crying his eyes out, emotionally very, very moved. But he said he wasn't crying because of the Kala standing there in her beautiful white dress. She was crying because of the Khatan, the Madrich. Hashem can bring people together from the strangest ways and the strangest journeys and bring them together again. Hashem makes shidduchim. He's in charge. If you go about it in the right way, then it's guaranteed. If there's a heavenly voice that says, Bat ploni le ploni, if Hashem has already ordained that, has already made it beshert, made it fated, go about it the right way, then don't worry. I mean, he can arrange that. The girl can be living in Australia, and you can be living in Los Angeles. Hashem can make that happen. That's not a problem, as long as you go about it in the right way. Yeah. What's the wrong way? What's the wrong way? There's some of my Talmidot here and some old friends here, but most of you I don't know, so I'm just interested because we get to know each other, right? Please put your hand up if you believe in love at first sight. Anybody believe in love at first sight? One romantic, yes? Two romantics, good, two. 3 romantics, 4, 5 romantics, good. Yeah, oh, shyness, yeah, come on. Any other? No? Good! There's no such thing as love at first sight. It doesn't exist. There was a musical, and then after that I think it was a movie, I'm not sure. I don't even know which one it is. But in it, there is a song which is called Some Enchanted Evening. Right? And it goes like this. Some enchanted evening, you may see a stranger, across a crowded room, and somehow you know even then, no you don't, you complete and total moron. How can you love somebody across a room? You can be attracted to her or him. You could lust after him or her. But love them? What does it mean, love them? Did you turn me down? Did you turn me down? I've got no voice, don't turn me down. How could you come to love somebody? That's not how it works. The Gemara in Megillah talks about the 4 most beautiful women in history. The Gemara says who they were. Sarah was the most beautiful woman in history. She's in that book. And then there's Abigail, David and Mother's wife. Who else is there? Esther. The Gemara says Esther, and the Gemara says not Esther because she was green, whatever that means. So they said, so therefore Vashti. So whatever way you look at it, Vashti was the 4th, maybe most beautiful woman in history. Now imagine when you go downstairs, or when you were getting sushi downstairs, in comes a guy with his wife, she's taking his arm, and she was Vashti. What would you think? Wow, what a beautiful woman. Isn't he a lucky guy? No, he's not. She was a Nazi. She really was a Nazi. Vashti was vile and evil. But on the outside, she might have looked very pretty. You see, there are things, as I mentioned before, we're going to discuss the difference between boys and girls, men and women, and how they see things. This is one of them. I've made, now let me make this very clear so there's no mistakes, I've made 50 shidduchim. Now don't be excited. I only ever make a shidduch if I know the boy very well and the girl very well. So if I know the boy very well and the girl very well, and then I feel confident that I know them well and can bring them together, and I run the shidduch, and the guy they come to but they're a bit uncertain, then it usually goes very well indeed. Right? So that's generally how it goes. So I know a little bit about shidduchim. If you ask a young man, what are you looking for? They always start off with the exact same thing. Now I know because I was a young man, right? So guys, we can talk man to man here, okay? Guys, if I was to ask you that question, what you're looking for, what would the first thing you would say be?
I need a good-looking woman.
Who said that? Who said that? Who said, yeah, you need a good-looking woman?
Yes.
Yeah, good for you. Yeah. Now, are you a good-looking guy?
Absolutely.
You are? I'm not attracted to you. It's a very strange thing, and particularly, you've got to see this incidentally, particularly older guys, they've been divorced 7 times, and they're very rich, and they look a bit like a rhinoceros, I won't say which end, and basically, but they want I need somebody who's about 27, and she's got to want have with you, so incredible. Yeah, the problem is that men are immediately looking for what she looks like. That's the first problem. Therefore, I could supply them with a Vashti, and they'd be very happy. Yes, the mother of your children is Eva Braun, Hitler's wife, right? I mean, are you going to be happy with that? I don't think so. Yeah, the first problem is that people, now don't get me wrong, and this is quite clear in halakha and common sense as well. Common sense is a very, very important part of Judaism. In fact, Moshe Rabbeinu came down from Har Sinai with the Luchot, and on it are how many commandments?
9.
10. No, there were 11. 11. 11? Only see 10. No, it was 11. What was the 11th? Thou shalt have common sense. It doesn't say it anywhere. It doesn't have to. It's common sense. Right? You have to, it's simply common sense. Common sense says, of course, that a man and a woman have to be attracted to each other. But I just heard, sadly, I was at Levaya last week of an old friend of mine, and his son said that his father used to say, which I never heard him say, so very clever. He said, don't look for a wife the way you look for an etrog. Don't look for a wife or a husband the way you look for an etrog. Ever seen guys at an etrog when it comes to Sukkot? And little magnifying glasses, maybe there's a tiny flaw, the tiniest of them. And then they take it to the rabbi. No. If you're looking for a human being who's flawless, then make sure you are flawless. But you're not. Shlomo Melech says, even the tzaddik, great tzaddikim, think of the Ben Ish Chai, think of the Vilna Gaon, think of the Chofetz Chaim, think of me. Think of the greatest tzaddikim in Jewish history, right? And ask them, are they perfect? Absolutely not. But unfortunately, guys, and particularly guys, are looking for perfection. They start off with the physical. And that's a problem. Of course, you should be good looking in your eyes. But what's good looking in one person's eyes is not as good looking in somebody else's eyes. I'm really interested in what's inside the person. I've got to tell you a story. My brother-in-law passed away a year and a half ago. He lives in Beit Began in Yerushalayim. And in Beit Began, there was a lady, and she's a genius. She is one of the world experts in her field. I think it's physics, if I remember rightly. I might be wrong. But she has a medical condition, and the medical condition is that she cannot control the movement of her body. So her head shakes like crazy and her hands shake like crazy, which is incredibly, incredibly brilliant. Not Tourette's when they shout, but this is everything's out of control. No, not Parkinson's, something, it doesn't matter. Anyway, so there's a guy from New York, Jewish guy actually, and he was trying to get his PhD in the exact same field, and she was the expert, so he wrote to her saying, would she be his supervisor through the PhD if he came and finished it at the Hebrew University? And she said yes. And so he would come every week to discuss his work and his research with her and his progress, and after a year and a half or something, he got his PhD. And everybody who knew the guy was expecting this handsome young Jewish guy to go back to America. Now he's got his PhD. But instead he wasn't going back to America, and he was continuing to visit this professor in the wheelchair who couldn't control the movements of her body. And then one day when we were discussing, I don't know, quarks or whatever physicists discuss, he said, I'd like to ask you a different question. Will you marry me? Will you marry me? And she managed to point to her chest with the hands that won't do what she wants them to do and said, why would you want to marry this? And he said, I'm interested in what's inside this. When they get married, my brother-in-law told me that the entire neighbourhood of Bayat Began took the day off work. They weren't all invited, they just decided it was their simcha, it was their celebration, because sometimes you find people who so inspire you by showing you what it's really all about. And incidentally, I'm not suggesting you should do that, you could do that, I don't think I could do that. But some people could. But if a person is only looking for incredible beauty, it's a bad, bad mistake. In fact, I remember as a young fellow came to see me, not too long ago, a couple of years ago actually, and he'd been married and he was divorced and he was looking to marry somebody. And I was very impressed with him, and my wife was very impressed with him. And even though my rule is I only really get involved if I know the boy well and the girl well, in this case, I was impressive enough that we decided, and I had some girls' resumes on my computer who were looking for a fellow. So I sent off the resume of a young lady, and within about 5 minutes came back an email saying, no, not for him. I thought, that's not even enough time to read it. Okay, fine. So the next day I sent another young lady's resume. Straight away, no, not for me. And then the third time, and then I started to get it. So I did something very naughty. I Googled today's top 10 Hollywood actresses. And there was a picture of a young lady who was just like the Gomorrah and Megillah, top, beautiful woman. You don't get to be a successful Hollywood actress if you're not beautiful. And actually, I always forget her name, but for some reason I'm remembering it, which is very strange. It's called Blake Lively. Blake Lively. Anyway, so it was a very nice stick picture, and I just cropped her face. And I took one of the resumes, and I changed the details in the resume, changed the name of the girl, put her picture on it, sent it off. 3 minutes later, not for me. I thought, I can't help you because you're a moron. And did he look like top 10 Hollywood men? No, I don't think so. It's of course incredibly important you find the girl attractive. But it's an interesting thing, when you actually come to love someone, you know, when somebody walks into a room for the first time, then you appreciate and you calculate and you see that they're a handsome person or a beautiful person. But isn't it strange that when you actually get to know them after a while, you don't really know that anymore? It's your sister, it's your brother, it's or your colleagues at work or whatever. It's just, that's them. And if you like them, that's what they look like. And if they have a mole in their cheek or, whatever other tiny flaw, the person he loves got a mole in their cheek. There are people who get married who are overweight, and people who are underweight, and people who are small and tall and blonde and dark. And suddenly for everybody, 40 days before he tears of blood, a heavenly voice calls out and says, Bas Poloni Leploni. And if you go about it in the right way, and that cannot possibly be just focused on the superficial, then Hashem will put it together. If you don't go about it the right way, then you won't. Well, Rukhaim Kanievsky was once, a young fellow approached Rukhaim Kanievsky, and he said, I don't understand. It says that there's somebody for everybody. Hashem created somebody for everybody. I've been in hundreds of shidduchim. I've not found mine. And Reb Chaim, who is a mystical, a very Mekubal type rabbi, said, the first one was your B'Shem. The first one was. But you were too picky. Now you've lost her. And now you've lost her. So if you go about looking for the wrong things. So that's the first thing. In fact, I remember my Rosh Kollel, his father was a dime in the London Bet Din. And he told me a story about one of his brothers. In fact, I think it was his youngest brother. He was a lovely fellow. But when he was a young man, he went out with a girl and he met her for the first time. And he came back to report to his mother what he thought. And she came into her husband's study. He's sitting there with the Gemara open. And he looked up and he said, no. She said, we have a problem. He liked her too much. He liked her too much. If you go out with a girl for the first time or a boy for the first time and you're totally blown away, particularly if you're a boy, what did you like too much? The way she looked. That's a terrible basis for a marriage. Nobody stays looking that pretty forever. That's what you're be'ikar. That's what you're primarily attracted to, and then you're in trouble. Another terrible way to go about getting married is to live together beforehand. There's an organisation in London called TGIF, set up by Jonathan Sachs, Lord Jonathan Sachs, because in the West End of London there was all these, it's a bit like Wall Street, that's London's Wall Street, and there was about 3,000 young Jewish people, young Jewish professionals who were working in banking and finance, they're incredible amounts of money. By the age of 27 they're driving Porsches and BMWs and stuff like that. And they just weren't getting married to each other. So Jonathan Sachs, together with somebody else, set up an organisation to deal with these people, TGIF. He, who was the star of Anglo Jewry, of British Jewry at the time, said that he promised that the first couple who got married, they're bringing them together, the first couple who got married, he would personally be Masada Kodashim, he would officiate underneath the chuppah. The organisation, when I went to speak to it, had been going for 10 years. And in 10 years they had 3 engagements. And 3 engagements went off. Because in that world, living together is the norm. And living together is the worst possible basis for marriage. And incidentally, that's statistically proven. When people live together as husband and wife before they become husband and wife, what is the basic reason they claim anyway that they're doing it? Of course, we know the real reason they're doing it, but what do they claim the reason is? To get to know each other. To make sure they're compatible. And they've lived together as husband and wife, so they've examined, they've explored every single aspect of living together as husband and wife. So it should be, once they know that they're compatible in every possible way, having lived together for a year or 2 years, when they get married, it should be a more successful marriage, and yet statistically, there are far more divorces, a far higher percentage of divorces for people who've lived together as husband and wife than people who didn't. Why? Because living together as husband and wife is the worst possible basis for a marriage. Because you're making a very important and simple statement. I'm not committing to this. I'm not committing to this. The most important word in relationships is commitment. And I'm not committing to you. The guy's all rich, the girl's all rich, right? She's extremely beautiful, so we live together. I've done everything I've done with this woman for 2 years, fine. And there are more beautiful women, and there's always younger and more beautiful women coming along because that's how the world works. I'll just move on. The women, though, are far more realistic because they know that they have a biological time clock ticking and stuff like that. They're looking for solidity. They're looking for commitment. Men aren't, because men, I can do this at any stage in my life. But my late wife, Alea Shalom, was a very wise lady, used to say, if a man doesn't get married by the age of 40, chances are he won't ever get married. Amen. Why? Because he doesn't know how to commit. He doesn't know. Have you ever seen those plants, see those little trees where they weave the stems together? They look like a girl's ponytail. Have you seen those things? I always wonder how they do this. It's very interesting. So I looked at it and said, I can't remember what it's called, but when they bind them together, then it has to be an exact right stage. If it's too young, then it's like a glass. It's like blades of grass. It's too soft and it falls apart. If it's too late, it won't bend together. But there's a moment in which it does bend together. There's a moment in our lives, or a period in our life when we're pliable and can bend together, and a period when we're not pliable, when we won't bend together. And so if you wait till 40 and you think, yeah, I can settle down any time, chances are it won't be. Because the thing that actually makes it work is commitment. So I've got 2 daughters, and my 2 daughters, the first one went out with a boy in Yerushalayim. She was in seminary in Yerushalayim. And she phoned me up and said she met him 3 times and they were getting engaged. Now, I'm not Hasidic, and so it's like, 3 times? But when you think about it, coincidentally, they're incredibly happily married and they've got 3 children with 1 on the way. And so, why does that work? Isn't that insane? Why does that work? The answer is, it's interesting. It turned out that her father and I had learnt together in yeshiva in Gateshead in England many years before. Her father's got almost the exact same background as me. Her father is a rabbi, like me. Father is in education, like me. Father doesn't have any money, like me. Both my daughter and son have been brought up, absolutely in the same sort of educational background, same sort of religious background. Were going in the same direction, wanted the same from their lives as each other. They had so much in common. Then after that, all they had to do was to meet each other, be attracted to each other, like each other. And after that, of course it's going to work, if they're committed. Because if you're committed to marriage, if you run into problems, what are you going to do? Because you want it to work? I'm dealing with a couple just now. They came to tell me that their marriage is in trouble. I said, look, will I help them? Well, okay, it depends what the situation is. I've got 3 stages of helping a marriage that's in trouble. Problem number 1 with our marriage is, he leaves the top of the toothpaste and she leaves her makeup all over the place, something like that. I think I might be able to save the marriage. Problem number 2 is a serious problem. And both are willing and want to work on solving it. I'll probably be able to help save the marriage. Problem number 3, a serious problem in the marriage, when one or both don't want to work on it, game over. Then it's a divorce. But if you're committed, then it will work. But you won't do it yourself. And as my Talmidos who are here will tell you, I only really teach 2 things wherever I speak all over the world, and one of them is get for yourself a rabbi. And as aset l'charav is in the masculine, the feminine form is aset lach rebetzin. A woman should ask a woman for guidance, especially these days. And of course we're all reeling from the horrible news that's been in the case of sex abuse and suicide this week. Disgusting, horrible stuff. But women should go to women for advice, men should go to men. And you listen to that advice, and somebody will help you overcome the problems in marriage, because marriage, it takes work. A shidduch is made in heaven, but a marriage is made and remade and continually committed to down here. Cars are made in Detroit, but once you've got a car, you have to take it to get it serviced regularly and go to the garage regularly and have it checked up regularly. Same with a marriage. You need to be able to go to an expert, whether it's a rabbi, a therapist, or whatever, a rebbe, and whoever, we're going to be able to help you to make sure that it works. A good marriage is made in heaven, and heaven on earth. I've been married twice. My late wife passed away from cancer. I'm married again now. I am seamlessly and happily married twice. Was it always easy? Of course not. Did we need help sometimes? Certainly. But because we were committed, it worked twice. So I'm not telling you stuff which is theoretical, I'm telling you stuff that actually worked for me. Let me finish by saying this. Most Jews, in my experience, are good people. The most common midah, character trait that any Jew possesses usually is the character trait of chesed. If you're interested in chesed, which is helping other people, start with yourself. The greatest chesed you can ever do is to find somebody to marry. Commit to making it work. Work at that marriage. create that happy home that a non-Jewish son of the Archbishop of Canterbury can look and say, whoa, is there anything we can have that is like that? And then bring children into that happy marriage that you've worked to create. And do the greatest chesed of all, which is to create 2, 3, 4, 5, however many children you're going to have, and let them be welcomed into a wonderful, happy, secure and safe environment, which is good for them and good for you and good for Klal Yisrael. A good marriage is heaven and earth. Let me give you all a bracha. For you, work at it, heaven and earth.